Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at one of Fantagraphics' pieces from the Jacques Tardi library. It was The War of the Trenches. This is an intense book, and Tardi really, like in his intro to the book, he's saying he's not trying to make a history about World War One. He's not trying to make any kind of statement other than focusing on what the soldiers in the trenches went through, that he's interested in the stupidity of war by showing the impact on the people. And I think he does a perfect job of this. And the artwork in here is beautiful. Without seeing the original art, I don't know how well it's reproduced, but looking at the tones in here, they look pretty well produced. There might be a little bit of fill-in, but I kind of doubt it. I really like that Tardi went with a thicker, darker tone. It makes the whole thing look like gloomy and heavy. He's using this one really dark gray tone over it, and then doing some really masterful manipulation of the tone by scratching, and it looks like maybe putting some white paint on top of it to get the look of these mud splattered jackets and mud stained equipment and blood. And he really creates a sense of atmosphere and grime throughout the whole book. Here he's showing the division between what the French foxholes would have looked like more chaotic and disorganized and dirty, versus the German ones, very German engineering. Everything's perfect. Like they even have, it looks like streets and stuff, so they have like an internal map system in their trenches there. Interesting contrast between the two. It's hard to imagine that the more organized side wound up not winning, but I guess when you bring a country the size of America into it, it gets a little bit different. As you go through the book, there's really no one narrative throughout, and there's really no division of all of these short stories, which is really what it is. It's almost like this dreamlike montage that just kind of flows through all of these different characters. And sometimes it seems like you're naturally flowing from one character to the other, and sometimes it feels like an abrupt jump, but there's no chapter changes or anything. So it kind of feels like you're a fly flying around through history in World War One, and just kind of getting these little glimpses, fly on the wall glimpses of all these different awful things that people would have gone to. It also seems like Tardi has done a lot of interviews or something. It seems like these are probably actually real stories that were told to him by somebody. He also mentions, he has in here in the introduction, I believe, or in the back, here in the introduction, his special thanks is to Jean-Pierre Verny. He knows everything about 1914 to 1918 down to the smallest detail. And so Tardi would call this guy up and basically just ask him a million questions for every page or panel, because he was trying to be as accurate as possible. So there's a lot of just really well researched, I can't say well observed because he wasn't there, but it feels very tangibly real. A lot of nice little quotes scattered throughout too. There was really no reason whatsoever to die for any country, no matter which one. That's how Benet felt about it. I'm with you, buddy. Me too. War is the stupidest thing I could think of. I almost want to put books like this down, because it's like I don't even want to read or think about war anymore. It's such an obviously waste of our time and resources, and the people run off to war to protect something as artificially constructed as the idea of a country or a nation is insane to me, and I just get frustrated. And that's obviously the intention of a work like this, is to make you frustrated. Like, why in the fuck as a species are we still doing this? Oh my god. You also get some honesty about what it was like, to be in the army on the French side, to where, you were being, people were being executed, but French soldiers were being executed for things out of their control. There was really totalitarianism on both sides to make sure that these guys kept fighting. They had to have gotten so discouraged to make sure they weren't deserting. There's a little piece here that kind of emphasizes that from the French side. Odd things were happening in the schools by the front. There were strange teachers who weren't teaching the history of France, but making it. Not that we could do anything about it. They were our superiors. I feel like I've been witnessing more and more of that in academia now, where people aren't trying to create free thinkers, but they are trying to teach people what to think. And it's concerning to see it happen from firsthand from the inside, and it's concerning to read about it in things like this because it's suggestive of where we're headed. Some really gnarly dream imagery here. I'd never thought about that before, but thinking about these guys who they've been in these conditions for God knows how long. They can't be getting any sleep. When they do fall asleep, every bit of input that they've had for a couple years on end is the most uncomfortable, vile, despicable portions of human behavior. Seeing your friends' brains leaking out of their heads. So I never thought about that before, but yeah, that would be a very uncomfortable dream life. I'm sure your brain trying to process all of that stuff. And here, they're kind of making fun of him. It's like, oh, look at him. He's dreaming about his girlfriend or whatever. But then really he's dreaming. Yeah, he's dreaming about his fiance, but really he's dreaming all this awful stuff. So Tardi is very good at making you think about all aspects of living in a war zone, especially a World War I. You're in the trenches, like the most insane, we're just going to hang out here and throw explosives at each other and then every now and then charge each other. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. What are people thinking doing this? But anyways, graphically, some really beautiful renderings of no man's land here, just from a compositional standpoint, but also from a atmospheric standpoint, capturing the nastiness of it, the grimness of it, the bleakness of it, but then getting some stellar abstract compositions out of that while he goes. I think out of all the Tardi books that I've read so far, I still have a few more hanging around that I haven't read. This is by far my favorite, both in terms of art and writing. Here now we're going into the jungle, so they're talking about, hey, there were things happening in these battles in other places too. They weren't just all out on these open, barren mud pits of no man's land. There's stuff going on in the jungle, and you see that Tardi is equally competent at drawing awesome jungle scenery. This is an artist who really, I think, is focused on place and space and atmosphere, even more so than figure. But his figure work is stunning too. And in an image like this, where he's showing this really extreme lighting, you get to see some of his beautiful rendering style, where he draws with a really thin, clean line and then comes back in and just slaps some heavy blacks on top of it really calligraphically. I think this panel here, this set of characters here, is some of my favorite drawing from Jacques Tardi, especially this character here with that big mark right there. There's just some really sexy, juicy ink mark making. And then you can see some of this really just tragic, horrific imagery on where this guy falls over into a pile of his buddy's guts. Just real harrowing imagery there. You can also see how he's using the tone to create textures throughout here, where he's scratching out a lot more of the tone than normally, or here where he's getting these really, really nice textures by kind of just scratching over the top of the tone, I think, and using that all throughout to get these mud spattered trench coats that they've all got here. I think that's really great. Then in the back he gives, as he's coming towards the end of the book, Tardi also says, okay, now I've given you all of these emotional stories about these awful things people experience. Now let me give you some statistics to make this tragedy, the stupidity of war, even more obvious. So he says, you would need 330 million cubic meters to fill up the 780 kilometers of trenches on the front. And the coast, cannon shells, etc., 2,500 billion francs. For that price, every inhabitant of Europe, not to mention the Russians, could have been given a small four-room house. But, numbers. So, not only everyone in Europe, but everyone in Russia for that price could have been given a reasonable size, they said small, but a 4-bedroom house is a pretty big house, even if it's a small 4-bedroom house. That just kind of shows what a waste this is. We're battling over resources that everyone has, and if we weren't battling, would be more available. I just don't get it. I don't think any normal person gets war, and Tardi really makes that very clear, the stupidity of it all throughout the book. And then also shows just some of the, like in the statistics he's going through and showing the casualties of war, not just the dead, but the live. 3,595,000 wounded, 56,000 amputees, 65,000 maimed. And I believe he's just talking about French numbers. I could be wrong. But I think just from a tactical standpoint, from a structural standpoint, putting that information near the end of the book after diving everyone into the first kind of person reporting of specific events that happen to specific people, I believe, or at least constructing fictional events that match up to things that people would have gone through, to create those character driven emotional reactions following that with the statistical data is smart. I think if you flip it around, people are like, yeah, whatever, numbers. But when you put it in a context like this, so this really is a hell of a performance. Like I said, I haven't read all of Tardi's work yet. I have a bunch more to go, but so far, It Was the War of the Trenches is one of my favorite. And I think Fantagraphics kind of knows it too, because their Tardi stuff's not all the same size. This is one of the bigger, this is like a full-size album. Some of them are a little smaller. So this one seems like they gave it some extra treatment. And maybe things have been re-released smaller size. I don't know, whatever. But for my money so far, this is the most must-have Tardi book. I think this one, I would say everyone needs to have and everyone needs to read. So definitely get this one. But yeah, really, the more Tardi I read, the more I appreciate his mastery. House on Fire by Matt Battaglia is a just gorgeous book where Matt's kind of making an emotional response to the years of COVID and wrapping that into a sci-fi dystopian future that really the sci-fi dystopian's backgrounded, and you're focused on the emotional journey of two characters in a really beautiful way. And then that's enhanced by Matt's like really awesome, loose, kind of Paul Popish dry brush work. And then Sean and Matt have worked to get this second kind of orange spot color in there that's going to look really beautiful, and has allowed Matt to use his dry brush technique to add tone to the thing too. So with Sean's production technique, this is going to be a gorgeous book with a lot of heart.